Five.
Great. Welcome to the May 8th, 2024 meeting of the Redmond Planning Commission. I'd like to call this meeting to order. We'll start with a roll call. Commissioner Aparna.
Present.
Commissioner Coleman.
Present.
Commissioner Copley.
Present.
Commissioner Gagne.
Present.
Oops, can you check your mic?
Present.
Perfect. Commissioner Van Nyman. Oops, and that one too. I think it wasn't on.
Present.
Wonderful, thanks. Vice Chair Woodyer.
Present.
And I'm Chair Weston. Thank you to the following staff for being present tonight: Glenn Coyle, Lauren Anderson, Ian Lefcourt, Jeff Churchill, Becky Free, Lauren Alpert, Audra Cardenas, Tim Maharg, Kim Dietz, Chris Wyatt, Todd Rollins, David Lee, Jenny Liebeck, and Cameron Zapata. I look for a motion to approve the agenda.
So moved. Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
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 Thanks,
Aye.
that's approved. And next, I look for a motion to approve the meeting minutes from March 27th and April 10th, and the meeting summary from April 24th, 2024.
So moved.
Seconded.
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Thank you, that's approved.
Aye.
Next, we'll hear public comment and items from the audience. Topics not related to our public hearing later tonight. Do we have anyone today?
Yes, we have 3 speakers, 2 in person and 1 online. We'll start with the folks here in person. David just stepped out, so we will call Devin Kellogg.
Thanks. You'll please keep your comments to 3 minutes and start with your name and address.
Hi there. Good evening, commissioners. My name is Devin Kellogg, and I live in Education Hill. And I just wanted to read a few paragraphs from the Global Methane Pledge that was signed in December of 2023 by 155 countries, including the United States and the European Union. Methane is a powerful but short-lived climate pollutant that accounts for a third of net warming since the Industrial Revolution. Rapidly reducing methane emissions from energy, agriculture, and waste can achieve near-term gains in our efforts in this decade for decisive action, and is regarded as the single most effective strategy to keep the goal of limiting warming to 1.5 degrees Celsius within reach, while yielding co-benefits including improving public health and agricultural productivity. Participants joining the pledge agree to take actions to reduce global methane emissions at least 30% from 2020 levels by 2030, with over 155 countries. Okay, I read that part. Meeting the pledge has the potential to reduce warming by at least reduce warming by 0.2 degrees Celsius by 2050 and prevent annually 26 million tons of crop losses, 255,000 premature deaths, 775,000 asthma-related hospitalizations, and 73 billion hours of lost labor due to extreme heat. A reminder that natural gas is used in buildings is the top source of methane in cities. State decarbonization plans say 95% of existing buildings need to be fully electrified by 2050 and no new gas infrastructure by 2027 to reach our state goals. Now to the policies. In utilities, I'm glad to see movement away from natural gas in UT 60. However, since so much of our success hinges on this, consider strengthening the language, at least adding the word rapidly or immediately. I still maintain that UT 69 pipeline failure impact mitigation should include seismic safety measures. For residential regulations, there's a comment about encouraging gas-burning fireplaces, which is inconsistent with these goals. And under the SEPA regulations, lists Overlake as a low seismic risk area, but it has multiple high-pressure pipelines running through it that do pose a risk. It also lists air quality as within federal standards, but studies show that indoor air quality is 2 to 5 times, and occasionally hundreds of times higher than what are considered safe for outdoor limits. And this is especially true for buildings with indoor combustion machines. Thank you.
Thank you.
Next up is David Haynes.
And again, if you could please keep your comments to 3 minutes and start with your name and address.
Hi, my name is David Haynes. I live in the Estero Park, Overlake area, where there's like all these parking garages that are the foundation of a settled concrete and separated concern of the foundation that has a negative impact on the units, where some of them have like the beams are slightly loose. And so when somebody's slamming their door, they're constantly startling and bothering their neighbor. We need like 21st century first world quality housing and commercial buildings and schools and libraries that have like robust floor plans that are intellectually stimulating, that are not on the side of the road next to the bus or the train, that still needs noise abatement within transit-oriented affordable housing. But we don't need watered-down deregulations to accommodate nonprofits that are not qualified to build a proper home, that have to subcontract. And hopefully y'all have realized that the 21st century first world quality has to have noise abatement, and it has to be resident and pedestrian friendly, where you want to walk to the grocery store, but you don't want to have to cross like 152nd because it's like an unsafe public-private partnership of a highway at 152nd in the Overlake Park and Ride. There's a $14 million contract to like change the sidewalk and replace a traffic light, and they've left it unsafe the whole time for 17 months. And all these people are fed up with living there because it's too noisy. They got like 26 dumpsters that come in between the buildings and bang and clang coming from 2 different buildings. And they're destroying the mental health of the neighbors across the hallway. They're so pissed off, they either move within 30 days or they start slamming the door. And some of you people are allowing watered down integrity of commercial real estate, where like Homegrown and Molly Moons has to share like a sharecropper amount of rent from a double, triple mortgage that's inflated. That's obsolete floor plan. That causes spit spray. You can't even enjoy your ice cream without the toxic spew of the sooted cars that are allowed to road rage through there. You gotta have an understanding that we need redevelopment that takes away the street from the road rage flying through and gives a robust build out as a trade to the developers. Like Overlake is a perfect example of where you get Microsoft, Starbucks, Safeway, Blackstone, BlackRock, and like a few other the bankers that own the whole Safeway strip mall, and have them redo the whole thing without accommodating the laziness of the modern wheel driving through every block and only allowing them a certain height, you know? But you got to like tone down the noise that's coming off the Overlake SoundLink light rail. They make you walk to the platform right next to where the lights are flashing and the bells are banging and clanging. And then you got to sprint like 50 yards to catch the train if for some reason, if you're getting off the train, you have to hop over the fence to avoid all the noise pollution. But if you sprint before the light fully triggers, you might be able to beat it, but it's unfair to make people listen to that crap. As soon as you come, like going to work or coming back from Bellevue, you got to put up with that crap right before you go home. That's like modern third world inner city violations. And 520 going through Redmond and the road rage that accommodates is like a location inhalation for what causes cancer. And you take a look at all these houses you want to put right next to like a bus depot, you got to have a noise wall, some sort of noise abatement, you know? But like 520's got all this toxic spew, like you want to display the kids' youth, but there's like too much toxic drive-through because there's too many roads driving through. You got to like redevelop with a friendly like neighborhood walk without putting up with somebody's inconsiderate, disrespectful road rage from the modern wheel. Driving through every block, bothering people, running through the lights, driving home drunk. Cops ain't gonna do nothing about anybody. They're looking for overtime and law-abiding events. But anyway, I was supposed to talk about a couple other things, but you have to have 2 shifts on all of these public-private partnerships. Like one starts at 7, one starts
I'm
at 8.
so sorry to
Thank you.
interrupt. Thank you for your comment.
Next is call here. Anna Buryakova, so let me just...
Hello?
Hi, Anna, this is the Redmond Planning Commission. We have...
Hi.
Hiya. You have, sorry, just continue. You have 3 minutes to speak, and please say your name and address, please.
Okay, hi. My name is Anna Biryukova. I live at 15654 Northeast 93rd Way. I am mainly here to talk about urban tree canopies, but I would also like to mention a bit about something I saw on one of the slides for the meeting today. It was about making sure there's enough middle housing. I would like Redmond to focus on the development of more purchasable housing in the downtown core. One way to ensure prices can remain affordable for people in the long run is to ensure people can buy a unit so they have a stable flat monthly mortgage payment and not be at the mercy of yearly rent increases. I would also like to suggest that apartments and condos not have separate building codes, as that discourages developers from building condos. And I also think it's a little bit classist and suggests that people who rent a unit do not deserve as high of a building code quality as those who can purchase a unit. All people deserve high quality building codes for their homes. In regards to urban tree canopies, I have a few comments and suggestions. I would like Redmond building code written in such a way that developers would be more mindful and respectful to the needs of trees when designing their new construction. This means that the small tree pits that are currently commonly designed by developers being an absolute last resort. More trees and natural landscaping should be done in long planting strips. Trees should be available on all sides of a new development for an even tree canopy. I would like the size requirements for tree pits to be larger so they can encourage healthier tree growth. But more importantly, long and wide tree strips should be encouraged over tree pits. Once large development projects are built, it is unlikely they will come down and be rebuilt anytime within the next several decades, so it is important we get the code for tree planting areas and pedestrian-friendly sidewalks required as soon as possible. This would ensure that future new developments give pedestrians the best experience in terms of nice sidewalks and urban tree canopy. I think the significant tree replacement ratio should be 1 to 2, at least for the larger significant trees. I think replacement trees should be required to be similar in diameter as the trees cut down when the replacement trees reach their mature height. This would discourage developers from cutting down large trees and replacing with only small trees. Sidewalks need to account for ample space for tree planting strips. Citizens and pedestrians should be the priority when designing new development in our city, not real estate companies maximizing the amount of apartments they can profit off of in a land parcel. We need to ensure sidewalks have ample room for a case of 2 wheelchair users going opposite ways on the sidewalk, and also have tree landscaping strips large enough to give room for tree roots without damaging sidewalks. Redmond residents should not have to settle for one or the other in terms of accessibility or environmental wellness. Redmond residents deserve excellent standards for both. Thank you and have a good evening.
Thank you.
Bye.
And did we have one more? That's it. Okay. Great, thank you. So next, we're going to conclude our work on the natural environment element and the critical areas regulations update for Redmond 2050. I want to introduce Lauren Anderson and Glenn Coyle.
Hi, this item is just the report approval of the recommendation that you made at the previous meeting.
All right, any comments before? Actually, I'm going to start, since we have so many new commissioners, I just want to explain what we do here. So we've already had our discussion about the particulars of the element and the contents, and what we've already voted for a report to be put together that contains all of our work in this area. So what we are doing now is we all did one last read through of the report. We're making sure that it's all accurately reflecting what we said. There are no missing pieces or glaring errors. So it's usually a fairly fast vote unless you found something that obviously needs to be fixed before it goes to council. So with that, I look for a motion to approve the Redmond Commission, the Planning Commission recommendation and report on the natural environment element and the critical areas regulations update of the Redmond zoning code for Redmond 2050 to City Council.
So moved.
Thanks. Discussion? Did anyone notice anything they'd like to correct? All right. So all in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
All right, thank you, that's approved. So next up, we're going to conclude our work on the Phase 2B elements for Redmond 2050, which includes capital facilities, utilities, and participation, implementation, and evaluation. And for this, we have Glenn Coyle again and Audra Cardenas.
And ditto to what I had previously stated, this is just a report of the recommendation that you made at the previous meeting. And Audra and I are here on hand if you want to, any questions.
All right, any questions before we vote? Great. With that, I look for a motion to approve the the Planning Commission recommendation and report on the capital facilities element, utilities element, and participation, implementation, and evaluation element for Redmond 2050.
Second.
Discussion? Nope, all in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Aye.
All right, thanks, that's approved also. All right, we're on a roll. Next, we're going to conclude our work on the residential regulations for Redmond 2050. This is with Ian Lefcourt, Audra Cardenas, and Tim McCark.
Hello. This is a report approval for the residential regulations package. Same approach as we've done for the last two items.
All right, any questions before we begin? All right, so with that, I look for a motion to approve the Planning Commission recommendation and report on the residential regulations for Redmond 2050.
So moved. Second.
Any discussion? All right, so all in favor?
Aye.
All right, thank you, that's approved as well. All right, and our final one for tonight. So we are going to conclude our work on the SEPA infill exemptions, overlaid plan to action, and overlaid neighborhood plan addendum for Redmond 2050. This one is with Becky Free and Lauren Anderson.
Good evening, Commissioners. We're going to do something slightly different for this time around. We didn't do a vote for approval. We just did a go ahead and get the report ready. So the motion for tonight would be Planning Commission recommendation of approval of the SEPA regulations and overlay neighborhood plan addendum and the PC report. So we're just going to combine it all in one motion. But if you have any questions or would like any discussion, I'd be happy to do that before.
Does anyone have any questions? All right, then we're going to move ahead. I am looking for a motion to recommend approval for the SEPA regulations and overlay neighborhood plan addendum and to approve the Planning Commission report.
So moved.
Second.
And I actually realized I did not include the overlay plan to action in that. Do I need to include that also?
That is okay because it is grouped as a part of the SEPA regulations because it's in 2170.
All right, is there any discussion? All right, all in favor?
Aye.
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 Great, thank you. Thanks, Becky.
Thank you.
All right, so next up, we have our public hearing on the Phase 2C elements for Redmond 2050, which includes land use, community development and design, and climate resilience and sustainability. This is Lauren Alpert, Becky Fry, Glenn Coyle, and Ian Lefcourt. Yep, so we're going to start with an intro by staff.
I'm Lauren Alpert, Senior Planner, she, her pronouns. Let's see. Okay. So we'll be doing the public hearing for land use, community development, and climate resiliency. So starting off with the land use chapter, the land use element, this sort of sets the direction and future growth in our community. While all of the chapters are important and everything that has been reviewed so far has been important, we like to refer to land use as the star of the show. So some of the major policy drivers of land use are the community values. So for example, complete neighborhoods, and that's come from a lot of the community engagement that we have done thus far, and looking at focusing our growth in our centers. It meets our growth targets of our housing and jobs that was established in the environmental review and our state mandated growth, and our state and regional requirements, ensuring our land capacity and housing needs are met in all income levels, and accommodating middle housing, importantly. So significant policy updates that we've seen in this chapter from our last comprehensive plan are that greater variety of housing choices, that introduction of complete neighborhoods, so adding some of those non-residential uses in our residential areas, and adding a lot of those mixed-use designations into our community, especially outside of our centers.
So the community development design element is a brand new element. As you recall, early on, we just made a call to combine anything related to character design, just where growth is going to go and what it's going to look like, into this new chapter, which combines the urban centers, the character and historic preservation element, and pieces and parts from land use and all the neighborhoods. So all of those things were then just consolidated into this new chapter. And then we have added brand new, for the first time ever, a section on inclusive design, as well as introducing the concept of corridor planning, which will kick off after Redmond 2050. So we're setting the stage for that. One of the things that is also set in this chapter is we're setting the stage to move neighborhoods into this chapter as well. After Redmond 2050, as we start to update each of the neighborhood plans, then they'll move into this chapter. So again, it's combining a bunch of different things, but it's also setting the stage for the future. It also really implements a lot of the vision that the community has set for who we want to be and what we want to look like, and a lot of our equity-related conversations. So along those lines, one of the major focuses of this chapter was equity conversations. How do we have equitable TOD, but also a bunch of other things. How do we accommodate community members with disabilities? How do we become an inclusive community? We spent a whole year talking with the community and having a lot of engagement. In your packet, I have put a link to the report that summarizes a lot of that information. I will let you know that information was so large that there's a lot of links to sub-reports. So it really kind of depends on how much deep diving you want to go, but in order to keep that report manageable, we did do some summaries and then some links to some additional information, but that's out there. All of that also resulted in a number of changes in the last version of this chapter as we incorporated several policies that were new or edits based specifically on that feedback. The other thing that we're trying to do also is, again, simplifying and consolidating, updating conversations about character that really played a huge impact on the development of this chapter.
Hello, I'm Glenn Coyle, Senior Planner. I also like to recognize that Jenny Liebeck, our Environmental Sustainability Manager, is on this call if there's any questions on this element. Next slide, please. Next slide. So wanted to note that Redmond, as a community, has been very proactive in terms of climate resiliency, sustainability actions, and is noted on the screen that we currently have a lot of policies in our current Redmond 2030 utility and natural environment elements. It's almost 300 policies related to sustainability in the current, not the one that we're updating. And also, it's also noted in a lot of our different plans, as you can see here, our strategic plan, most importantly, our environmental sustainability action plan, and also a lot of our different functional plans, which are like our system type plans, parks, water system plan, wastewater plan. And we actually have a couple of new plans coming out in the city that also, we have the climate resiliency and sustainability tree plan. But
Vegetation management plan.
Thank you. Vegetation management plan for climate resilience and sustainability. So we want to note that at the planning level that the city is doing a lot of actions. So that gets back to why are we doing this? And so this is because of a new element, but we want to be proactive in terms of meeting new state requirements for climate resilience planning. There's a requirement for a city like Redmond is in 2029, but because we're doing a lot of this work, we want to be proactive. We heard a lot from the community, council, planning commission, that this was something that we needed to do now. So we're developing this new element, and really this is not the end, this is the beginning of this process. But really right now what we're looking to do is just provide that alignment with all those existing plans that we have right now. And then, of course, we'll update that in the next couple of years as we begin to update all our plans and actions like that. So that's it for the climate resilience element and why we're doing it. So.
All right, any questions before we start the public hearing? Commissioner Aparna.
Thank you, Chair. I had two questions, actually. One is the vegetation management plan coming in front of the Planning Commission? I wasn't sure. Is it something that we would review, or?
I believe not so. Jenny, if you're on the call, I believe she's leading that work. She might be able to answer that. But I don't believe it's a code change, so.
Yeah, it's just a plan. It's already been presented to council. That's being led by the Parks Department, and I'm happy to share that that document. And you may see some signs around the city too that are basically educating the public around areas that are being flagged for kind of this new management approach. So yeah, to Glenn's point, it's not any code changes or anything like that. Rather, it's changes in practices and how the city operates completes its operations.
I will add to that, though, that the work that we're doing on the open space and landscaping code updates does reference that plan. So we're integrating that plan into the code updates.
Thank you. And then I had another question, which was related to the public comment we heard earlier, related to long planting strips. So I see references in the community design element related to sidewalks and, in the corridor plan for the corridor COR 1, I believe. I would like to see the idea of planting integrated into, like we mentioned sidewalks, we mentioned a whole bunch of elements. Tree planting specifically would be nice. It's also because trees are more resilient when their roots can talk to each other. So when we have them in little islands and they can't talk to each other, they may not survive as well. These are for the urban trees. So there's no point planting them if we can't keep them alive.
What's the correct avenue for that feedback? Is that related to this plan, or this element, or would it be better?
I'm sorry, can you repeat that? I couldn't hear it.
Oh, sorry. What's the correct, is that feedback relevant to this particular element, or is there a better way for Commissioner Aparna?
It wouldn't necessarily impact the plan. It impacts us at the code level. So as we go through the code edits and come back in, we're updating the public realm standards and the streetscape standards, and the tree code will come back to the Planning Commission this year as well. So it'll come in that aspect, not necessarily in this piece.
Right, but what's happening is none of the policies here refer to the trees. It's in the narrative, but it's not in the policies. There is, so the community standards, design standards talk about sidewalk requirements, building heights, and so on. I'm wondering if this is something we should consider, because trees are part of our aesthetic as well. So even if it's a reference at the higher levels, just saying we'll integrate it, it's a nice call out. Just putting it out there, not to get into the specifics, but more in terms of it's not there in any of the policies specifically. So, yeah.
Sorry, I was just for procedural this sounds more like a study session kind of topic.
does.
Maybe we can delve into this a little bit more, but let's,
Yeah, maybe we'll do the public hearing and then we can come back and figure out where that should go in the matrix. Okay. Any other questions before we start? All right. So let's see. I will open the public hearing. Glenn, if you could start by introducing our public comment?
yes, we have 3 speakers. Mr. Haynes stepped out, so if he doesn't come back, but we'll first go to David Morton.
Good evening, Commissioners. I'm David Morton, Redmond 98053. The draft climate resilience and sustainability element of Redmond's comprehensive plan presents a framework for addressing climate change impacts and striving towards carbon neutrality. Here's an evaluation. Strengths are, first, the vision statement paints a picture of a sustainable, resilient Redmond, emphasizing equity, clean energy, and community well-being. It sets ambitious targets for carbon neutrality and underscores the importance of addressing environmental justice concerns. Second, comprehensive approach. The element covers a wide range of climate-related issues, including greenhouse gas emissions reduction, resilience to climate impacts, and natural resource management. By addressing both mitigation and adaptation, it adopts a holistic approach to sustainability planning. Third, the emphasis on community involvement and equity is commendable. Engaging diverse stakeholders ensures that climate solutions are inclusive and responsive to the needs of vulnerable populations. Weaknesses are, first, while the element outlines broad goals and policies, it could benefit from more specific targets and actionable strategies. Providing measurable objectives and implementation plans would enhance clarity and accountability. Second, limited integration. While the element acknowledges the relationship between climate resilience and other planning elements like land use and transportation, it could further integrate these considerations into policy development. Enhancing alignment with other planning efforts like housing can maximize synergies and avoid conflicting priorities. Third, the draft predominantly focuses on the resilience and sustainability of the built environment with less emphasis on the natural environment. Ensuring that policies are relevant and equitable across diverse levels of urbanization within Redmond is essential for inclusive planning. Some recommendations for improvement are, first, establish specific time-bound targets for renewable energy deployment and resilience measures. Quantifiable goals facilitate monitoring progress and prioritizing actions effectively. Second, strengthen integration with other planning elements, such as housing and natural environment. Aligning policies across sectors ensures coherence and maximizes opportunities for synergy. Third, place a stronger emphasis on equity considerations throughout the element, particularly in policy implementation and resource allocation. Ensure that vulnerable communities have equitable access to benefits and opportunities for participation. Fourth, expand outreach to engage traditionally underrepresented communities and stakeholders. Utilize culturally appropriate communication methods and prioritize language accessibility. Fifth, develop detailed implementation plans outlining specific plans, responsible entities, timelines, and resource needs for each policy. Sixth, robust mechanisms for monitoring and evaluating the effectiveness of policies and programs. Regular assessment allows for adaptive management. Finally, factor in external factors such as technological advancements, regulatory changes, and emerging risks. Maintain flexibility to adapt to changing conditions and new opportunities for innovation and collaboration. By addressing these recommendations, the climate resilience and sustainability element can become a more effective tool for guiding Redmond's transition towards a sustainable, resilient future. Thank you.
Thank you.
Okay, next we have Devin Kellogg, and I'd like to note that she'd like to speak on 2 of the items that are part of the public hearing. So.
All right. Again, if you could start with your name and address.
Hi, good evening. My name is Devin Kellogg. I live in Education Hill, and As you can tell, I'm very passionate about these subjects. I have the fortune or misfortune, depending on how you look at it, of acutely understanding what's at stake for families everywhere if we don't meet aggressive climate goals. Wildfire and mudslides have shown up on my extended family's doorstep. We are all experiencing impacts one way or the other. Thank you for indulging me in sharing my thoughts and discoveries as I look through this lens. As for the land use policies, I just had a couple thoughts regarding LU 11, which talks about the industrial zones. If you could please include businesses and schools in the list of folks to be notified of the undesirable or harmful impacts. There happens to be a private preschool with over 250 students located just west of the proposed zone. There's also a large Lake Washington School District property located to the east. I also proposed the addition of a land use item that will seek to minimize the expansion of natural gas infrastructure since it poses risk to the community of safety, air quality, and contributes significantly to climate pollution, as I mentioned earlier. Pipeline location and safety should be considered along with seismic risks. I don't know where this fits, if it goes in land use, utilities, or SEPA, but it would be nice if it was covered somewhere. As for the climate element, I will just start by saying that this element is music to my ears. I'm so grateful the city leadership and planning staff have gone above and beyond what is required to really address the problem and propose thoughtful, equitable, and attainable visions and solutions. I especially like the scientific and incremental targets included and the inclusion of the Environmental Sustainability Action Plan. I like the reduced vehicle miles traveled targets and attention to last-minute transportation options. That affects my family personally. The support of distributed energy resources and partnerships, as we've heard even from PSC that this is the vision for the future. The phase-out of natural gas and the inclusion of natural solutions for resiliency. On the note of removing as in regards to Parna's note about removing the language around the 1.5 degrees Celsius, I don't have a problem with the proposed language. I would just like to remind the Commission that the current IPCC science says we are still at a point where reducing heat trapping pollution, especially methane, can actually result in significant downward temperature adjustments. So we shouldn't give up. And just so I wrote that again. So just because we've crossed the threshold doesn't mean we should stop striving for that limit. In fact, the most recent reports emphasize even more reasons why this limit is so critical to stay below and how important our actions are over the next few years in achieving this goal. So by 2030, we should be 30% of methane and 50% of greenhouse gases.
I'm sorry, we're almost at time.
Okay. I'm happy to report, this is, I'm kind of combining two and one. So I do have a lingering question regarding CR29, the transition of utility energy fuel mixes to renewable sources to achieve 100% renewable energy. While that's 100% renewable sounds good, the term utility energy fuel mixes sounds to me like we're promoting residential use of renewable natural gas, which is still methane, and by every study I've read, it's not a viable option for community applications.
All right, I'm going to have to stop you there. I'm sorry.
Oh.
You're way past 3 minutes.
Okay, well.
All right, thank you.
Technically, I was doing two. Is that okay?
I believe there's still, it's still one public hearing, so as far as I understand, we're still
okay. I
our
misunderstood.
limit.
Well, anyway.
You're welcome to send the rest in writing, and we'll read them in that. Thank you.
Thanks again, and I hope you'll consider those changes.
All right, next up.
It looks like our other speaker has left, so.
Well, perhaps if he still wants to make a comment, he could also submit it in writing?
Yes.
Yes, all right. In that case, I'm going to close the verbal portion of the public hearing. Written testimony will remain open. And for our study session, we are back to staff.
There's not any additional discussion. We can bring up the issues matrix. I believe there was a couple open items on the climate element, so I can pull that up. Okay. Boom. All right. I apologize. I was not available for the last meeting. I was pretty sick and it was really sad that I could not join. So, but thank you, Lauren, for covering on that. So my understanding is all the climate issues were closed. Number 12, we weren't sure if it was closed. That was Aparna's issue. It was related to CR1, which I know you also brought up as an issue, so we weren't sure if that particular response was okay, but we wanted to talk about the other issue after that.
Yeah, I think this was closed last time.
Okay. We went back to the tape, we weren't sure, and there was little discussion, so thank you. Let me just make a note of that. And then there was also a new issue that you had brought up, which was also just brought up in the public comment on the 1.5 degrees Celsius, and you had made a suggestion on the policy text. And staff had reviewed and agreed that that was a change that could be made, so we are proposing that for the final draft.
I'm okay with this. It's just sad, though, because I wish we could say something like, according to the latest guidance by IPCC, which allows a more moving target, simply because right now only 6% of the scientists think 1.5 is going to be a target we can meet, and that's probably going to diminish over the next couple of years, after the summer especially. So I think IPCC is still our North Star in terms of the overall targets, policy-wise. So I think we should just say from IPCC, under IPCC guidance or something like that, to clarify. Or the latest IPCC guidance. I think that would be best. So we can track according to whatever goals are being tracked over the next couple of decades. Thank you.
How often sorry, one question to clarify. How often do they release new guidance?
So the reports come out once in every 2 to 3 year period, but they're tracking the 1.5 degree mark. So the guidance itself is the modeling changes, and it's a global effort, and they inform policies to the whole world's leaders.
But they'll release new reports well before we next review
Right.
this document. Okay,
Right.
great, thank you.
So it's basically as soon as they publish it, we can pivot to that number, but it will change.
Do you want to keep this open or close?
If they could add that, then I guess add that, please. Thank you.
We can research. I just note for the commission that we're also trying to ensure consistency with state law,
Right.
GMA guidance, and our internal documents.
Right.
So, but we'll review that to see if that language can fit in also
Right.
with all those other pieces of the puzzle.
Absolutely. And also, if they refer to IPCC as a North Star as well, then we should too. But we can, certainly not have the 1.5 degrees, because if we miss it, then already this policy is redundant before it's adopted.
Yeah, it's overly specific. Thank you.
And that's all we have for issue matrix things on all three items, so any additional discussion?
All right, does anyone have anything new or anything they would like to add? And especially new commissioners? All right. Well, in that case, I think we will close on this for this week, and we come back for an additional study session. Sounds like it's going to be short.
On the 29th, yes.
All right.
And we'll take a look at this particular issue and
Great.
see.
Want to add too that we had a chance to just do a quick word search for trees or forest and there's over 20 policies in 3 chapters related to trees, including a whole section on tree canopy management. So I would encourage you to just look really quickly. It's in the community design, in natural resources, and in the climate resiliency chapter. So it's covered in a lot of different places. I did notice there's some redundancy there, so as we do our redundancy review, that might become a few fewer, because there's a couple that say almost the exact same thing. But for right now, there is a number of policies related to trees. So if we do need to make an edit to cover something, we can probably find an existing policy but we can add that to the issues matrix too to come back.
Would you like it added?
I would like that, please, because it was a public comment, and I think because I am seeing some of the trees which are isolated on the sidewalks not doing very well. So we want to make sure they survive.
And that is something that the new climate resiliency vegetation management plan actually does address, is street trees and varieties of street trees.
Oh, yes.
I have
Commissioner
a general
Coleman.
question. If we have something that was open and closed before we joined the commission, which there's something in here that I was interested in, but it's been open and closed.
Once it's closed, it's closed. But if you want to bring up a similar topic for more information, you're welcome to.
Okay. Just for reference, and let's see where we go. It's in the land use section, number 7, about first and last mile. And I didn't know what the context was in the discussion, but it's something that I'm also kind of concerned about how we think about. This was something that came up in the Redmond 2050 CAT conversations around how we ensure people who are doing that last mile, particularly to light rail, can do that in a more effective way than is possible right now. I don't know the conversation. If it was all covered, then we can move on. But I was unsure whether to raise that.
So we talked about this a little bit in transportation, but if there's additional information that you'd like to cover in land use, then that could be appropriate. And so that would generally be like when you're looking at the material that was covered. I don't know if you were drawing this comment from the issues matrix or from the text of the land use element.
The issues matrix, yeah.
Okay. So maybe what you could do in this is you can go back and look at what's actually in the land use element and review it. And if you think that there's more to add or something missing, then if you could go offline and provide that feedback, then it can be added to the issues matrix, and then we can come back to it next session.
That's great. Thank you.
Yes, thank you.
Yeah, that's perfect. Just to reiterate that, it would be helpful if you did email that to Glenn before the meeting so we could prepare and help have a robust discussion at the next meeting. That would be helpful.
Great.
Thank you.
Vice Chair Woodyear.
I was just going to say that would be true across the board. So the focus is on not the issues matrix, but the documents that the issues are coming from.
Mm-hmm. Glenn.
Just to clarify, what was the issue that you wanted added on the trees? It wasn't clear on what that was, in which item. It was for climate element?
It's in the community design.
Oh, community design, okay.
Yeah. It's basically.
I was like taking notes, sorry.
Yeah, it's in the planting piece.
Yeah. There are 4 policies related to trees in community design, but there's like 16 in, natural resources, and there's several others in climate resiliency. So we can come back and have a separate discussion about how that works together and if there's a gap that needs to be filled. If it belongs as a gap in community design, then we can make an edit to that. If it belongs as an edit in one of the other chapters, we can identify it. I don't necessarily need to put it in multiple places on the issues matrix, so just putting it under community design is fine.
Great. Are there any other questions? All right, so I think we'll see you next time. Yeah, thanks. All right, so moving right along, our next up is our briefing on our legislative amendments for the Redmond Zoning Code Rewrite Phase 3, and Kim Dietz is coming up. Or I should say Kim Dietz and possibly team.
Good evening, Commissioners. I'm Kimberly Dietz, Principal Planner with Economic Development, part of Planning and Community Development. And with me this evening is Todd Rawlings, who is also with the Planning Department, our Process Improvement Manager. And online, we have Tim McCard, another Principal Planner from Current Planning and Development, and David Lee, who is the Manager of Current Planning and Development. So this evening, we would like to present to you some amendments to the zoning code and municipal code. Municipal code items are being provided for reference only as they are the purview of the City Council, but they do provide a little bit of context related to the items that you're reviewing for amending the zoning code. And we are available for questions this evening. We also look forward to developing an issue matrix with you. So I'd like to share some slides. One moment. I have a new computer. It takes a moment to get used to these. Okay. There we go. So for those of you who are new, this is part of a Redmond zoning code rewrite, which is an opportunity for the city to periodically improve and update its development regulations. It is being done consistent with Redmond 2050, though it did begin several years ago prior to Redmond 2050 developing its policies. And the idea was that it allowed the city to prepare for some of the policies that you are reviewing now. And then after that point, we're running in tandem with Redmond 2050. So you are probably seeing some regulations and some references to the Redmond zoning code rewrite already. And tonight, we're bringing you part of Phase 3. We are bringing you this package separately because it involves some state legislation that we are required as a city, along with other cities and counties, to update, and it is on a very strict timeline. The timeline is necessary so that cities and counties will take action at a key date when all of a piece of legislation will also take action, and if cities are not, if they have not yet updated their code by that time, then they are at risk for having to pay some fees back to developers who apply for submit applications for development. Amendments to the zoning code involve a type 6 formal review. It's a permit type. And what that means is that the technical committee, made up of leadership for planning and public works, they make a recommendation of amendments to the planning commission. The planning commission holds a public hearing and reviews, creates an issue matrix, and then makes a recommendation to the City Council. Very similar to the work you are doing with Redmond 2050 as policy updates. This is focused on regulations. And then finally, the City Council will take action. So our goal with this package is that the City Council be able to take action before the end of the year, therefore not tripping over that deadline in which fees would need to be reimbursed to applicants. So the zoning code rewrite is a multi-year, multi-phase project. As I mentioned, it's an opportunity for the city to look at its code and to improve it in many ways, create consistencies with state regulations and other codes and policies throughout the city, and also to look at general improvements. One of the things we are doing in this code is we're looking at ways to improve the accessibility of writing, the legislation that's within the code itself, to improve the way that that is readable to the common person, to our applicants, to staff. And if the code is clear, it's more easily implemented. It doesn't become confusing, and it doesn't lead to unexpected outcomes. It also provides clarity for applicants and for staff. So that is one of the key things I wanted to raise for you tonight, in that as you review this package, here is an opportunity to look at that language and let us know if you think it is clear, if it is confusing in any way. Because, as I said earlier, this is This is a package in which the city is implementing legislation that is required by the state. So we don't have a lot of wiggle room like we typically would in looking at the way a policy works or looking at the way a regulation would have certain outcomes. In this case, we're just trying to implement what we've been told to implement. So your help with clarity will be greatly appreciated. And later this year, you will see the remainder of Phase 3 of the rewrite. Becky is going to be taking that lead and bringing to you in the next package some of the items like open space and landscaping. So this is a very quick turnaround. Typically, we take about 1.5 to 2 years to create a package of amendments. For this one, because it's already been identified what we need to do, and we have the strict timeline, you can see here that over the course of 1 year, we hope to get from the initial writing, which happened in January, to the council's action in Q4 of this year. The council will be involved in budget. At that time, this has some budget implications, and we'd like to be able to take this item to the City Council at the time they start discussing the budget. So we'll be looking to you to help us make sure it's clear and to be able to meet that timeline for the Council. So what are we looking at? We're looking at two bills, Senate Bill 5290 and House Bill 1293. The Senate bill is specific to project permit review, and it identifies very key areas of the permit review process that need to be updated. Timelines, very specific timelines that the city must carry out. There are also notifications and procedures that are identified in the bill and have been translated to the code. I provided in your packet an attachment that identifies the different portions. It breaks down the bill into different portions and then identifies what category of the permit review process they fit into so that you could better map that to the individual amendments that we provided. There's also a report, we're going to describe that in a moment, an annual report that allows the city to describe how it's meeting the bill and doing that on an annual basis, so meeting the timelines, meeting the notice requirements, and other procedures involved in project review. And then House Bill 1293. Sorry, little scratch. 1293 is specific to design review. Design review is undertaken for projects, and it is performed by our design review board. There are some amendments that we are asked to do as a city and others that we are required to do as a city. For example, we need to make sure that our design standards through which projects are reviewed are clear and ascertainable, that they do not reduce the allowed density, height, bulk, or scale that is permitted within a zoning district. And there is also direction that they should be reviewed concurrently with the permit review for a specific project. So you can review land use, your site, along with design review concurrently. One of the key requirements is that only one public meeting be held. So this is very different than what we do today, and we'll be able to walk you through a little bit of that in a moment. It does not apply to landmarks. So we have 16 landmarks in this city, historic landmarks. It does not apply to those. We're bringing 1293 forward with 5290 because there is a lot of overlap. When we talk about timelines for a project to be reviewed, very quickly we get into design review. And when we talk about notifications, public hearings, the limitation to one meeting, there is much overlap with the two. So we're bringing those to you together. So let's start with the annual performance reporting. And Todd, I would like to have him describe to you what we do today and what we are looking to do in the future.
Thank you. The Senate bill is requiring two primary things for us. One is they're setting specific time frames for the different types of permits that we review. Certain permits, like building permits, we get a certain number of days. And then as they get more complex, that increases. But the maximum time that we get for the more complex permits with public notice and public comment periods and so on is 170 days. And upon working with the team, now I've been with the city since last September, so not too long, but working with the team, we've identified some processes here that are greater than 170 days. So that has been a focus area. Some of our building permits are actually lower. They're like 30 days or less. So we're well within the timeframes. Now, I will still work with the teams and look for opportunities there, but of course, we want to focus in those areas where we are over the projected timeframes. So what I've been doing, again, is I'm embedded in the planning group. I've been working with the leaders, attending all the meetings, mapping out some of these processes, and then identifying those opportunities for improvement. So I utilize all of the Lean and Six Sigma quality types of processes that I learned, in my 15 years at Microsoft, for instance, and I'm bringing them here. We have identified already some opportunities instead of waterfall, as we say, one after the other, to parallel process, to do some of these in parallel. Now, a caveat to that is we aren't going to do parallel if it's going to then create rework later on. Because, for instance, that if we are looking at a land use and then they end up having to move the building, then that could create, some rework on things like the building permit. So we're looking very closely at those and making sure that we're not causing downstream errors and rework. But wherever we can, we're going to simplify things and streamline it. The second major piece of this is the reporting aspect. And so we have a software we call EnerGov, and in that software we are capturing the different timeframes of receipt of the actual application, how much time we are spending, how much time the applicant is spending when we send feedback requests to them, change requests to them. And then we add all that time up, and we will be providing the state, and we actually have been in the last 2 years, we've been providing the state with this report. We anticipated what they would need, and we are already providing it. So we're capturing the data. The state has not finalized what this new report will be, but we have a pretty good sense. How long, how many approvals or rejections, things like that, okay? So those are the two main areas of this annual reporting. The first report for the Senate bill is due March of 2025. It is for all of 2024, though. So we're already capturing that data in anticipation of this report. Also, the time frame limitations go into effect January of 2025. But again, we're already working to try and make those improvements ahead of time. Okay? So I'm available to dive deeper or answer any of your questions. Thank you.
Thank you, Todd. And next, I'd like to turn to David Lee. We mentioned House Bill 1293, and that's a change to our design review process. So David's going to talk you through what we do today and the changes that we are proposing as part of your packet.
Good evening, Commissioners. My name is David Lee, Planning Manager. As Kim mentioned earlier in the presentation, that there is a lot of interplay between House Bill 1293 and House Bill 5290 in terms of how the DRB interaction happens with development activities and the timelines that that intersect with that. So the technical committee recommendation is to omit the DRB based on the fact that House Bill 1293 essentially limits design review board meetings just down to one meeting. Kim, if we can go to the next slide. The reason we were recommending that is because the amount of meetings it takes for a project to get through with the DRB. So just to kind of step back a little bit, the DRB only meets 2 times a month. That's the first and third Thursdays of every month. Their scope is limited to Article 3 of the RCC, which basically deals with how a development looks from a very aesthetic standpoint. It does not govern, however, dimensional standards such as height, setbacks, density, open space, things of that nature. It's comprised of 5 design professionals and 2 resident positions, and these are all volunteer positions. So jumping back to how many times it takes a project to go through the DRB, generally a larger mixed-use project or a larger standalone commercial project will need to go to the DRB 3 to 4 times in order to receive the approval from the design review board. Smaller projects can go anywhere from 2 to 3 times, and a master sign program, which also needs to go to the design review board, generally only takes 1 time. In terms of the back end of review, we generally ask for a 3-week lead time leading up to any given design review board meeting. That 3-week lead time includes staff review of the materials that the applicant is submitting, drafting a memo and a recommendation to the design review board, and then also meeting prep, and that's including making sure that we have a quorum, getting the meeting room ready, getting notifications out, things of that nature. Some of the issues that we have run up against that adds time because of the design review board and the limited amount of time that the design review board meets is mainly because of quorum issues. There are times, again, these are volunteers that are also in professions that generally require some travel with clients, across the country. So there are times where we can't get quorums, which adds then to another, adds time to the process, getting to the DRB, having to save that project to the next DRB opening that we have that does have a quorum. Another thing that it does solve for is the amount of time staff is spending doing basically 2 different reviews, one for the design review board and then one for the actual formal site plan entitlement review, where we look at the other things such as height, density, setbacks, things of that nature. The other thing that it does solve for, it does give a single point of direction. There are times where design review board will ask for things that staff has not previously, and these all come out of the meetings. So with that, I'm available for any questions. Thank you. And Kim, back to you.
Thank you. Let me jump back to this slide because there are some other key changes I just wanted to highlight before we move into the questions. The Landmark Commission is connected to the Design Review Board. It adds 2 members specific to landmarks to the Design Review Board to review any modifications to our designated landmarks. So that work can only be done when the Design Review Board is meeting, and it needs to be done rather quickly because there are paying customers waiting and queuing up for their review as well. So we want to keep the Landmark Commission, and the recommendation for them is to continue as they are, but without the Design Review Board, we would propose adding 1 Landmark Commissioner to make it a 3-member commission. 1 commissioner can live outside of the city. That would hopefully be the professional person that is required for reviewing architecture involving historic buildings, and then 2 other members living inside the city can have a general interest in history, can also have design review experience, but there would always be one key member that had historic preservation, architectural background as part of the commission. And then design standards. I mentioned the design standards here because we are in the process of drafting design standards for the downtown. These have been underway for a period of time. We had a consultant assist us with that. So we're wrapping that up, and we'll be folding that into Lauren Alpert's work on the downtown code update and the policies with that. So that gives us another opportunity to look at 1293 and make sure that we are objective in providing those standards. Okay. Why don't we move into questions now while I...
Are you all right? All right. So I think we're going to start with questions, and this is to build an issues matrix. Yes. All right. Commissioners, any questions? Commissioner Aparna. And we'll just do one, and then we'll keep bouncing around.
Okay, thanks, Chair. I was wondering about the process improvement piece. Are we kind of shooting for what is the state-defined metric in terms of days, or are we actually looking at optimizing it for the larger projects I'm talking about? The reason I'm asking this is we have significantly upped the standards and requirements for our projects. So if we can give the development community something back in terms of at least a more streamlined process. So are there like KPIs attached to how we can squish this process to most efficient?
It's very good questions. What I'd like to say is we know we need to hit these timeframes because of the Senate bill, but the goal, to your point, is to get as fast and as streamlined as we possibly can. What I'm doing besides working with each of the teams to find out where we could run things in parallel is also to eliminate unnecessary steps that we no longer need, and a whole variety of other ways to reduce what I consider as waste in the lean Six Sigma world. So to your point, yes, we will streamline. Now, some of this has to do with our software and the way that we are using it. So one of the things that we're doing, I won't rabbit hole on this, but one of the things we're doing is we are installing a new version of that software so that we can utilize it fully, right? So our tools, the way that we're doing things, we're looking for those ways to run certain steps in parallel. Another thing that I think is really important, what we were finding is a high frequency of the applicant not even getting us all the right material for the first round. So what can we do up front to really help them to understand through checklists, through something we call a pre-app, which is a pre-application process. What can we do? And I'm looking at each one of those to try and get them more information so that the very first time they come in, they have everything, and we don't get that initial delay, right? We're also working on some projects where we are streamlining, for other reasons to deliver. And so we're going to pull whatever we can from those and see if we can standardize on those. So that's what I can share right now. Thank you.
Thank you.
Another question I had, I loved the idea of pulling apart drafting for design standards for the centers. I wondered if you were also considering that for neighborhood multifamily?
Yes, exactly. So all of those, the different multifamily, the downtown, multi-story multifamily, all of those we're looking at as well. That's all going to be part of this.
Okay, great. Commissioner Coleman.
Thank you. Question on what is the issues that happen if you don't hit these hit these guidelines. So either on a aggregated basis in a year, or on a particular project where maybe it's not the fault within the council, it's the fault of the person who's not responding. How does that work? What's the way that's approached?
Yeah, another good question. So there are specific guidelines in the Senate bill to deal with all those things. What I can tell you, not being a lawyer myself, but the best that we can understand is that if you've ever played chess, there's like a chess clock. So when the permit and review process is in our camp, we are being measured on that time frame. That said, we are also looking to try and streamline the entire process, which would mean the time, with the individual. And we haven't done this previous, but we may reach certain points where if the applicant is not responding, that we'll have to deny. So you may see some of that coming up more frequently. But we're going to do everything that we can to partner with the applicants and see that we can get the success. To get to your other question, though, what is the penalty if we do not? The penalty is that we would have to return or not bill them for, I believe it's 20% of the total fee, right? So if we had billed them and they had paid 100%, if we didn't meet our deadline, we would have to give 20% back. If we hadn't billed them, we wouldn't be able to bill them. So that is the penalty, okay?
Commissioner Van Nymen.
I'm just curious how we partner with other cities, because surely they're all going through the same process, and there's lots of lessons to be learned, right?
They are, yes, absolutely. So there is a state-run monthly meeting that all of us who see it has to be a city of at least 20,000 in order for this law to be in effect. And so all of us, Kirkland, everyone, Bellevue, we're all on these calls, and we're sharing some of our best practices and sharing. And there are some opportunities actually to share resources between different cities if we have some peak permit applications come our way. I'm working with Carol to Helen, the director, to see if those types of things could work. There are other flex staffing options as well. So we're looking into all of those. The reality is that all of our sister and brother cities are experiencing peak volumes too. So, the reality of it is we may not have enough staff to share, but we are looking into those things.
Commissioner Aparna.
I actually had a question about the SEPA exemptions and the SEPA info exemptions and all the SEPA exemptions that we're going through right now. Will that, I'm hoping that squishes some of the process as well, but does it make a significant dent in the process timeline?
Tim and Dave, would you like to take that question?
Sure, I can. So yes and no. What we have been taking advantage of over the last couple of years is the optional DNS process for most applications, and that streamlines things quite a bit. Essentially, that consolidates the comment period for SEPA with the notice of application comment period, so you don't have subsequent comment and appeal periods that have to run consecutively. So that's helped quite a bit. Obviously, exempting things altogether is the gold standard for efficiency. But even if that's not possible, for example, we have the planned action in Overlake, and in my opinion, that's we should expand that however possible to cover, really all of the urban centers. The planned action should look at things at a sub-area basis, a center basis, and do the environmental review accordingly, and then everything would be covered under a planned action, provided it meets the requirements of the zoning code. So yeah, we're taking advantage of the opportunities that are there through ODNS and through exemptions, but there's certainly more work that we can do and will do.
All right, I had an additional question about the crosswalk. So I haven't seen that before, and I'm curious how you'd like us to evaluate that document in particular.
The crosswalk that is part of your packet?
Yes.
The attachment. How was it evaluated?
Or how should we be reading that? Like, how should we be thinking
yes,
about
I'm
that?
sorry. So that was really just a roadmap to try to help you understand if you are looking at a particular part of the bill. I tried to break it down into isolated topics, like if it was related to time or related to notification. So that then helped me identify what parts of the code are going to be related to that. And then I was able to pull in the actual code piece and start to identify with the team to make sure that I've captured all the pieces that are going to need to be updated for that particular topic. So for your use, it is just knowing if I'm looking at this piece of the bill, I know that it's related to this topic, where might I find it in the code? And that we provided you those as an attachment in item B to the technical committee report, so you can see the majority of the work is in 2176, which is our review procedures, but there's a couple other pieces. For example, the design review board is mentioned in our lighting chapter, so that needs to be addressed if we are making changes there, but you can find the majority of the changes in 2176.
Great. Commissioner Aparna. Well, no, Commissioner Parna first, and then Commissioner Coleman.
That's quicker on the draw.
And then anyone else who raises their hand.
So I just had a question about the design, the no longer design review board. When we talk about public hearings for those very large, what Title VI projects, I believe you call them, or whatever that was, where do we, so who conducts the public hearings if we don't have a design review board? And my second question to that is, if with significant design standards coming, how qualified will the staff be to evaluate those design standards? How do we manage that piece?
Yes, thank you. I'll start, and then I'd like to turn to Dave and Tim to add anything that I don't catch. So, without the design review board, there will be administrative design review. So it is up to us to make sure that staff has the resources that they need and the applicant has the resources that they need in order to construct a project that is code compliant, use flexibility when it is an option, but that staff also has a very clear purpose and intent statement for that specific design aspect, so that they can provide the review that is needed to ensure the applicant is meeting the city's vision established by the comprehensive plan. If additional resources are needed, our recommendation is that a professional reviewer also be added to the team on an as-needed basis. That cost of that review would be then covered by the applicant. So if there are complex designs or the tower designs that staff is not yet familiar with, then we can ask that professional to provide a service to us. And you'll see that in the design review section of 2176.
Commissioner Aparna, if it's related to this follow-up, go for it.
So if we are, let's say the applicant, it's a complex project and the applicant's bringing in the professional, I can see two things happening. One, the professional is brought in at an earlier, more squished timeline, which is great, but will the staff be able to support that timeline? And two, just because somebody has a complex timeline, a complex project, do we really want to penalize the developer or the applicant to have to pay more to get that review, which currently they're getting technically for free with the DRB? So time, money, is that how we're phrasing it? Or because professionals are expensive?
Yes, so development does pay for development, so an applicant's fees are intended to cover the permit review process, as well as impacts like parks, traffic, transportation, schools, and so forth. But what I'd like to do, Tim has his hand raised. I'd like to turn to Dave and Tim, because they are their team is who does the review and who administers the fees.
So maybe I can back up a little bit and weigh in on the first question that you asked. So I think it's important, particularly with the required changes to design standards to make them objective and clear, that design review in that scenario, and really, quite frankly, design review under our current scenario, it's not design review. It's review to confirm compliance with applicable design standards. And so in that sense, it's very different than like a desk crit. And unfortunately, a lot of design review processes devolve into desk crits of architects giving criticism, constructive criticism, to other architects about the design of the building. And that's really not what it's intended to be. It's intended to be, do you comply with a specific standard? And so making the standards more objective and clear will certainly make it easier for both designers to design to them and staff to review them. Regarding the second part of your question, yes, it is fair for developers to pay for these kind of specialized services that are beyond the normal skill set of a city planner. So for example, many cities have on-call consultants for things like geotechnical services, wetland biologists, stream biologists, other hydrologists, to basically bring that expertise to the city in a more affordable and efficient way. So it's pretty common, and design review in this context would be essentially the same. We're bringing in a consultant that is hired by the city on an on-call contract to work on behalf of city staff and with city staff to provide a more specialized design review function for more complex projects.
All right, Commissioner Coleman.
I think my question was answered from the last one. I'm actually just going to follow up with a slight addition. If you omit the design review board, is there anything else that we'd be in danger of missing by not having them actually in place? And just as context, are there any past design review board decisions, if you look back and you went, wow, I'm glad we did that because we would have missed this? So I'm just wondering if there's anything else we might miss there. And were they, sorry, a slight addition, are they aesthetic in the past more than actually down to what you were saying about specific guidelines?
So in my experience, we have a really excellent design review board. And I think that the design review process by that board really adds a tremendous amount of value to the built environment outcomes of projects. And that's not just my opinion, it's the opinion of almost every applicant who goes before the design review board. Most design review board processes are not fun for designers, because it's not really done in a collegial and, I think constructive way. Our board really, I think, takes that to heart and, really works with designers to, formulate ideas of how to improve projects. And so, yes, I think that they do add value. Now, and I personally have enjoyed working with Redmond's design review board more than any other design review boards that I've worked with in 30 years, because I think they do a great job. Now with that said, with the shift to a more objective set of standards and a more narrow focus of design, which is going to be required by the state, I think that we can still, as staff, and when necessary with design consultant support, still improve those outcomes to get what we're looking for in terms of the built environment. So I'm pretty confident that, with amended design standards that are really focused on specific things that the community wants to see, that we can still deliver those positive outcomes. We did a lot of outreach last summer to talk to people about, we did some kind of workshops at community events to figure out what people liked and didn't like regarding building preferences. And we used that, I think, to really focus the design review or the design standards work that we've been doing.
Thanks, Tim. You're getting a lot of nods in the room. Commissioner Van Nymen.
Okay.
So there was a question that Commissioner Parna asked that we didn't get an answer to, and is there still there used to be a public hearing component, or there currently is, to the design review? Is that what?
So,
And
yeah,
will
I'm sorry
there be in the future?
Yes, I'm sorry that we didn't, I must have missed that question. I'm sorry. So there is currently a public process. So the design review board conducts public meetings. They are not public hearings, they're meetings. If the public shows up, which is quite rare actually, they are invited to add a comment if they would like to. But it's not a public hearing format. So with the change to administrative design review by staff, there will not be a design review meeting. So that public meeting will essentially go away. What will replace it will be, people frequently comment about the design of projects as part of the general comment period for any land use application. And so we would certainly solicit and take input on issues of design as part of the general comments that we would receive with all notice of applications for projects.
All right. One more question from Commissioner Copley.
With respect to the intent to involve the community and engage the community in both of these processes, the permit review and design review process, has the state given any guidance on how the notice to community portion of the project permit review and the public process might be improved with again, respect to community engagement and involvement?
Yes, the state is very specific in that. They're standardizing, I should say. They're specific in order to standardize what is provided in a notice, notice of application, notice of decision, the timing of those notices. I'd be happy to point out some of that in your issues matrix so you can see how that compares to what we have in the code today. Okay.
All right. So then going forward to our public hearing and study session on May 29th, what sort of feedback would you like from commissioners going into that meeting?
Yes. Like Commissioner Copley's question, if there are additional questions or any of the items that we discussed tonight that you'd like staff to further explore, provide insights into, please let us know, because it seems like we answered a lot of questions this evening, but if there are more or you'd like just more elaboration, please let us know, and we'll start with Commissioner Copley's questions. So you can email staff with those, and we'd be happy to add them to an issues matrix. We will provide another brief presentation when we come back for the public hearing in late May.
Great. Thank you for your time.
Thank you.
All right, so next up, we're going to keep Kim up and bring up Becky for the briefing on the consolidation and streamlining package for the Redmond zoning code rewrite phase 3.
Okay, before we dive into our presentation tonight, I do want to notify you of a change. We were hoping to get everything published today and prep for a public hearing late in May, but in the last week, there have been a number of questions that have come up that we need a little bit more time to resolve, because just putting everything in one chapter, there's just some things that we need to figure out. And it's taking us a little bit longer than we had hoped it would, even with a whole bunch of us working this weekend and late into nights. So we are going to cancel the public hearing on the 29th. We don't have anything published right now. I was hoping, still like into the day, I was still hoping to get something posted today. It's just going to take a couple more days. So what we're going to do is we're going to intro everything tonight. We've got our presentation. We'll cancel the public hearing, but we'll hold a study session. We'll have the drafts well in advance of that. Everybody will see that it'll get published, and we can walk through all the changes. It just gives a little bit more time for everybody to kind of digest it too. But what that will do is, instead of going on a separate track, what we'll do is instead continue the conversations for that, but the Planning Commission report approval and all of that part of the process will combine these topics with the omnibus package. So we'll go ahead and have these conversations because we know the community is going to have a lot of questions about open space and landscaping. But we won't bother to have a separate vote, report, the whole 9 yards. We'll just merge that process at the end.
And just to clarify on the timing for that, so any written comment that comes in before next meeting, will that be forwarded to the commission, or will that be pulled together and summarized in a later?
We can still take public comment at any time, but we won't hold the public hearing on this topic at all. We will separately, we'll hold the public hearing for the omnibus package, and the omnibus package will include landscape, open space, and land use.
Thank you for the clarification. That's great.
Yeah, we will not hold a separate public hearing for these topics. It'll all just be wrapped up in one.
But there's still an opportunity for public feedback.
Correct.
Definitely.
And because we're going to actually have the study sessions, and we'll still keep that public engagement and education and learning curve for all of us as we merge it all together. Okay. So I just wanted to point that out and share that. And then we'll go ahead and start the intro tonight, and we'll provide you links to the documents as soon as I do get them published.
Thank you, Becky. So, as I mentioned, this is another part of the zoning code rewrite and done in partnership with Redmond 2050. And there we go. Tonight is a briefing regarding open space, landscaping, zoning district tables, and some allowed uses and crosswalks as part of the development regulations. Again, this is also a Type 6 formal review. So as Commissioner Aparna had asked earlier, the Type 6 is it's a permit type today. Ultimately, it's more of a process. We will make some refinements to clarify that, but it involves the technical committee making a recommendation. So what Becky described is that we do not have that recommendation yet. We're still working through some of the material, and that will be coming to you much later. Also, again, the Redmond zoning code rewrite. So this is a package that we actually started in the first phase. And we very quickly realized that with the park plan update, with the park element, and knowing that the Parks Department was working on the resiliency of landscaping plan, that there was a lot of change happening at the policy and functional plan level that needed to be coordinated with the regulations. So we paused a lot of this work during the first phase of the rewrite in order to come back. And now that those other packages have been adopted or approved, we're ready to bring back the regulations to you. So it has actually been in the works since 2021. I don't reflect that here, but that's when we really started a lot of this work. The reason that we wanted to bring open space and landscaping forward is that they were two chapters in the code that were spread the most broadly and quite thinly throughout the code. The reason is when the code was last updated at a significant level, there was a vision to allow a person interested in developing in a specific zoning district to be able to pull that book, that folder off of the shelf and have all the information available for that zoning district. However, it ended up creating a code that was much more expansive than what we're thinking about today. So now we're trying to collect it all together, consolidate it back into single and logical chapters. So when someone is thinking open space, there's one place they can go to. By doing that, we avoid inconsistencies, we avoid creating conflicting code with ourselves, even in the same body, and we allow ourselves to be able to bring in those standards, like I mentioned, as part of the policies and functional plans. Okay, so two main groupings tonight, open space and landscaping, and then also the changes to the zoning district tables, which you've already started talking about. So let's start with open space. Do you want to talk about this, Becky?
Sure. So we've been working really closely with lots of different departments on this. Obviously, Parks is a huge component of this. One of the biggest things, as Kim had mentioned, we're just delaying it so that some of that work can be done. They completely have new different types of open space categories. We've reduced the number of types of open space just to simplify. How many are there right now?
There should be 4.
So yeah, we've gotten it down to 4 from multiples of 4. And so some of that work is reflected in here too. There's a lot of just standardization of terms, standardization of consistency of application. The one thing I do want to point out is in this particular work moving forward, what we did not have the capacity to do that we do want to do, and we'll probably end up with the downtown and Marymore package that will come later, is actually standardizing the open space and landscaping for the centers. Because right now, downtown has different from Overlake, which has different from Marymore. So the first task was just to get everything into one chapter. The second task will be to say, is there a way that there can just be one standard for all of the centers? And then here's where it might need a little tweak in Overlake or might need something slightly different just based on the centers. So just know that part of the work that you're seeing on open space and a little bit in landscaping as well, but more in open space, is kind of like a step in between. And then as we continue to move forward with some of the other code updates, you'll start to see it even being zipped up and updated a little bit more. But it's also updating with new information, aligning with the climate vulnerability and vegetation management, incorporating urban forms, like talking about podium top and rooftop open space and how we're looking at that and access, and we're incorporating universal design, right? So we're looking at all of those things, and it is coming from both Redmond 2050 and Redmond Zoning Code Rewrite. So there's a lot of different influences in there, and so it's a little bit of a messy chapter to look through right now, because you're going to see a whole bunch of double underlines indicating it got moved from somewhere, and then you'll have edits on top of that. The other thing that I wanted to point out too is because we're moving things from all sorts of chapters everywhere, your initial look is going to be just the actual core chapter. Your final package will include all of the different chapters that we're striking stuff from, because the actual adoption will need to do the strike-throughs. Right, and unfortunately, we're striking it from every single zoning district and other chapters where it happens to also exist. And so for the first part, we don't want you to have to worry about the things that we're just removing and focusing just on what the new chapter will be.
So the next piece, is the zoning districts, allowed uses, and crosswalks. So this is the most significant change that we're seeing in the code. And we're very excited about creating one place where people can learn whether a use is allowed in a specific part of the city, where a person interested in investing in the city can identify their use and look across the entire city in one page and see where they can add that use to Redmond. Also, we're cleaning up some of the interim work that we provided during the first phase of the rewrite because we were making some significant changes to zoning, specifically but use-based regulations. And we were also trying to create more flexible land uses to support businesses as they grow and change and move throughout the city. We created some things called crosswalks, and the idea was to help people who were familiar with the old code become familiar with the new code and know how things changed. So this is the opportunity to go back and clean up that interim work because it will no longer be needed. So Becky?
So some of the other things that this work is doing is currently we have over 50 tables talking about uses in the code, and it's going to go to 2. But we're not doing the downtown and Marymore and the mixed-use zones until next year. So what you'll have in this packet is like the interim step. You'll see we're moving Overlake down because we've talked about those uses, and that's going forward with this consolidation. We're also creating the new neighborhood residential and neighborhood multifamily. Those will go into the new 11 by 17 tables, and you'll see those struck out up above. The other thing is we're moving down business park and industry and all those things that we're not really making significant changes on in Redmond 2050. Those are just going to go ahead and move into the 11 by 17 tables at the end. What is going to live weirdness for about 3 months before we, in the interim, will be those downtown consolidations, the Marymore consolidations, and the zone mixed-use districts. So in this packet, it will look a little weird. So just bear with us. It's all going to end up in those 2 tables, but until we actually get that second set of zoning consolidation pieces worked on, we're going to have a little bit of both. But in the end, we'll have from 50 some odd tables to 2. And that's going to be the biggest difference. But as Kim mentioned, a lot of the other things that are happening are getting rid of use-based regulations, and that includes a number of things like in supplemental regulations within the zoning districts. Hey, if you're this type of use, we're going to require X, Y, and Z or whatever. And so we're trying to get away from a lot of that, but we're also streamlining the limited, if it's limited, having a note, a footnote immediately under the table that talks about what that limitation is. You don't have to go dive into 30 million tables to figure out which note it happens to live in. It'll be right there. If it's a conditional use, it'll be noted in the chart as well on the right-hand side. So if it's a conditional use, that's in the column. If it's a limited use, it'll have a note. And it'll be consistent all the way through. Right now, we use limited and conditional a little bit weirdly just because it developed over time. Then we're also doing the strike-throughs.
Yes. So what you're looking at here is the magnitude of change that's going to happen in individual zoning districts. So as zoning districts are reduced, the zoning district chapter will also be significantly reduced because this information, you can see how much information there is there on the first 3 images. That's in every single zoning district. So 52?
There's
50.
Over 50.
Over 50. Each of those zoning districts, 50 of them, has the, at minimum, the first 3 pages that you see here. That third page, however, sometimes is four pages or more in length. So that's a lot of information that's going to be consolidated down into 1 or 2 tables. So it's a very significant change. We're very excited about it, and we're doing it carefully to make sure that we don't miss anything. At the same time, we're also using the information we've learned over the last couple of years to inform land uses. So to make sure that centers or neighborhoods allow the uses that we've heard from the community are important. And in some places where they are heavily restricted today, maybe there's a lesser restriction, or maybe there's no restriction at all. So there's a lot of changes that are taking place as part of this effort. And then do you want to talk to the last image?
Yeah, and to piggyback on that last comment, though, too, one of the things that I just also want to reiterate is we're not doing the complete neighborhoods in this round. So when we did the neighborhood residential and neighborhood mixed use, if it is not allowed today, but we want to allow it in the future. That will go into the next version of this update, right? So we still have to talk about that neighborhood mixed-use zone. We still have to talk about how we want to address commercial uses in the neighborhoods. So that will become with that next package. So when you go through it, just expect, if there's a no today, but in a couple of months, you're going to start to see how we would integrate and how we would fully implement complete neighborhoods. So I just wanted to point that out too. So yes, we're making a lot of neighborhood and use-based changes, but sometimes it's going to be in two chunks. So there's the chunks that we can do today, and there's the chunks that are going with the downtown Marymore package. So.
Yes, and once we make those changes, what'll be left in the individual zoning districts is basically their purpose or anything that is unique to that district. If there is a certain design element or a certain, diving into the very fine details of how a land use exists within that, that can be within the chapter. But the chapter is really going to be focused on that purpose. What the purpose ends up doing is, as a project comes into the city, it gives staff the opportunity to ensure that that use belongs in that neighborhood and how it relates to that neighborhood. If you have say a retail use, if retail is called out and it's an 18-hour city, then certain retail, or an 18-hour neighborhood rather, certain types of retail would be supported in there. Some might not be. So that gives that extra information to help people discuss what belongs and what doesn't belong in certain parts of the city.
The other things that you're going to start seeing being removed are like in our design standards chapters. So we have landscaping and open space chapters, and then we have zoning district pieces. And then, over here, we also have open space and landscaping in 2160 and 2162. And so, I mean, there's parts about plazas, and there's parts about courtyards and rooftop, so there's pieces and parts specific to open space and landscaping that are in those chapters as well. So that also is getting structured, and that's an example from the last piece. So what this means is you've seen some of these chapters being struck through the residential piece. You've seen some of them struck through parking, because we're removing parking from each zone as well, right? So in the big, huge package at the end, we're striking the residential zones from single family and multifamily right now. Those chapters are going to be completely gone. But what's left of the interim downtown and Marymore and whatnot are going to be, here's some things that we're keeping for now, and then here's a whole bunch of strike-throughs. And it's going to, that strike-through package is going to be extensive. So keep that in mind. But also, we've touched 2104 with overlay package. We've touched, the zoning district with the residential package. Now we're touching it here too. So part of our job is to make sure the final package that goes forward for full approval is all cohesive in one. And so Kim and I have been working really hard on that too. But you have seen some of these chapters before. Obviously, we talked about uses with Overlake, for instance, right? And we talked about uses when you talked about the residential districts. But it is a significant consolidation and streamlining with some updates thrown in. So, but the bulk of this package really is just trying to make it a more usable code. Whereas some of the other bits and pieces that we've done, like the parking updates, that's a massive rework of how we do that code. This package is not a massive rework of how we do this code. It's updating to urban standards, updating for usability and universal design, but it's mostly consolidation and streamlining.
So as we mentioned earlier, we will not be coming back on the 29th for a public hearing, but we'll be back for a study session. And then the public hearing and additional study sessions would be scheduled thereafter. So we're open for questions.
Right. The eyebrows seem very high. This looks very cool. One clarification I just want to ask about your editing process. You are bringing everything in before you delete pieces. Is that correct?
I'm sorry.
You are bringing everything in before you delete it, so it's clear if anything's actually
Yes.
removed, there will be a red line that's in the package that you'll bring to us.
Yes. So within the chapter itself, if you do not see an underline in there, it was in the chapter originally, but most of that chapter is going to have double underlines.
Right.
Because we've moved it from another chapter into that chapter, and then we started editing it. For the sake of review, so that you don't see a whole sea of red, when I brought it in, and it just, from an ease of what's new, I took it and just made what moved black. And so what is a change from what was moved is in color. So you don't have to pay as close attention to the black because it's not a change to current code. You can focus in on just the color.
So that makes it easier for us to understand if anything's actually being removed from the code for good.
Yes.
Great. Thank you. And then one more point of clarification for the Marymore and Downtown and Overlake package that you were talking about, that is also this year? And it's different than the
The
omnibus?
downtown Marymore and mixed-use pieces are going in the 2025 adoption sequence, not the 2024 adoption sequence. But you will have a public hearing that late this year on that, and because council will adopt early next year. And so you'll still see those pieces this year. They're not going to be far behind, but we're trying to get this first package that will go into effect January 1st out the door, and then we'll continue to work on all of the other things that are related to downtown Marymore and the mixed-use pieces over the summer.
All right, commissioners, additional questions? Commissioner Parna.
I actually wanted to thank both of you. And probably gift you a whole bunch of red pens. But thank you for doing this. This is incredibly painstaking work as well. And you've got to look forward, backward, and look at redundancies. So give your eyes good rest, And I just want to say thank you.
Thank you.
My word was going to be wow.
Commissioners, any questions? Are we starting an issues matrix now, or will we wait till we actually see documents?
We're ready to start one now.
Okay. Is there anything that anyone wants to add at this point, or would you rather wait and read? You'll wait and read. Okay. Looks like we appreciate the intro, and we will review more when it comes back next time.
And I will let you, we'll forward the links to the documents as soon as they go live. So if they're live before the next packet, you can get an advanced chat because it is a little confusing. So we'll get that out as soon as we possibly can.
Great, thank you. Wonderful, thanks for being here.
Thank
you. All right, next up is staff and commissioner updates. Back to Glenn.
Good evening again. So a couple of updates on the schedule that should be noted. The joint Planning Commission and Council meeting next week, that's on Tuesday, May 14th, has been postponed. And we'll provide an update at a later time for when it is rescheduled. Also to note that our regular meeting that's on May 22nd, we had canceled that also just because of the way the items are, but we are having, we'll call it a special meeting on May 29th. So we are still having a second meeting this month. It's just got pushed out to the 29th instead of the 22nd. And it's on the items that we had discussed, study session on the climate element, and then some of the stuff on the zoning code.
And I just want to emphasize with that, if commissioners can send in any absences that they're aware of for that May 29th meeting as soon as possible, because we need to make sure that we can make quorum, that would be wonderful. But I guess in the meantime, we have vacation.
Yes, that's always appreciated. The sooner the notification for any missed meetings is very helpful because you see Jeff is on the screen, but we work diligently behind the scenes trying to move everything around and work on everyone's schedules to make sure that we have quorums and staff availability. So even if it's December, November, October, if we greatly appreciate that because we can start plugging and moving things around. So.
Yep, but especially with this unusual stretch. Yes. So great, thank you. Is there more?
I was going to say,
I have a
Jeff's on the
couple items,
screen, so
if I
I
can.
think he probably wanted to speak.
Hi, Jeff.
Thanks. Two items from me. One is an update that last night staff presented the SEPA regulations and Overlake Neighborhood Plan addendum to the City Council. The City Council was very pleased with the recommendations that the Planning Commission officially made tonight. So just wanted to pass that along to you. I seem to be headed in the right direction as far as the council is concerned. And then I wanted to harken back to a question from Commissioner Copley earlier about public engagement around the design of buildings and design standards. And what I wanted to emphasize, because you took a look and had a public hearing on the community design element, is that with a move to objective and ascertainable standards, as Kim was mentioning, the public engagement at the time that policies are put in place and standards are written is really important, because if a project is code compliant, it's going to get approved. So that makes what is in the code very important. So that makes your job important, but it's also just an advertisement for anybody listening tonight, that now is a great time to get involved, because now is the time that we're putting together those standards for moving forward.
Thank you. Any other staff updates before we get to commissioner updates?
That is all we have. Thank you.
All right. Commissioner questions or updates? Commissioner Copley?
Just a follow-up question from your update about the committee of the whole meeting being postponed. Is there any guidance on when that may be postponed to?
No, we'll have an update at a later time.
Thank you.
Other commissioner updates? All right. With that, I look for a motion to adjourn.
So moved.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
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 Thank you. We are adjourned. Good night.